We know for a fact that we have the support of some of the largest institutional shareholders of this company who have voted with the union on our proxy proposals.
Pittston's chairman and chief executive officer saw the vote as more favorable for the company.
The number of ballots that we put in would constitute a very large majority. We don't know how many of them might have been put in by the union blue cards and dated after ours, which would invalidate our votes, but all the indications I have are that we won by a rather comfortable majority on Proposition 1, probably a bigger majority on 2, and an absolutely landslide on Proposition 3.
The first proposal asked that shareholders be allowed to vote on the company's anti-takeover measures adopted by management. The second called for secret ballots during annual meetings. And the third asked the company to establish a committee that would study the possible sale of subsidiaries. In Southwest Virginia, a church group prayed for strike peace, while another 72 coal miners were taken to jail in the latest picket line arrests. And a prosecutor is critical of union leaders for urging strikers to risk serious charges. News Center 5's Lisa Mitchell reports from Lebanon.
The international union employee organizing and directing this strike has joined the troops of strikers getting hauled off to buses bound for jail.
I'm just one of the guys. You know, I'm just one of them coal miners. Standing up for what we believe in.
Russell County's Commonwealth's attorney may be prosecuting 1,000 misdemeanor charges and another 140 felony cases so far, stemming from sit-ins at mine entrances and violence along the picket lines. He'll prosecute unless Virginia's Attorney General finds a conflict of interest because of his former work for a Pittston contract mine. Commonwealth's Attorney Dennis Jones says he has sympathy for the union. The strikers should be leery of union leaders like Marty Hudson, enticing them into serious trouble with the law.
His statements are, in essence, that we're going to continue to violate the law until we get what we want. That when you're charged with a Class 3 felony, whether it's a truck driver who strikes a coal miner, whether it's a coal miner who strikes a truck driver, personally does physical harm to them, and you are faced with a Class 3 felony with a minimum imprisonment of 5 years and a maximum of 20, that's not civil disobedience and that's not civil resistance.
While more picket arrests were underway, a Catholic Church-affiliated group led a prayer vigil near Pittston headquarters, calling for peace.
But they have made the workers, after all of this struggle and all of this pain, that we can come out better with real participation between labor and management, rather than always knocking our heads against each other.
In Lebanon, Virginia, Lisa Mitchell, News Center 5.
Pickets remained at Pittston operations, but no mass arrests occurred. The company reported few incidents between their drivers and striking miners, though the trucks continued to roll and the pickets continued to make their feelings known.
This may be the quietest day so far in the strike, but as it enters its 6th week, over 1,500 miners have been arrested and no end to the labor dispute is in sight.
But today's quiet atmosphere is not likely to last very long. Marty Hudson, one of the strikers arrested yesterday, says the union will continue its strategy of clogging the court system and the jails.
It was a nice ride. The bus was warm.
Did you spend any time in jail?
No, we got out about 5:30. Yeah, that's the first of, I guess, more to come.
Hudson continued his war of words with Russell County Commonwealth's Attorney Dennis Jones.
He has those special interests tied in, tied into Pittston's property, and he interprets the law, tells me how to interpret the law. I would hope he would just interpret his legal ethics.
Company President Mike Odom disputes that his company holds leverage over Jones.
That leverage has nothing to do with the state police out there arresting people for breaking the law.
Both sides agree that a legal remedy exists if Jones has a conflict, and the union has moved in court to have him step aside. But the agreement at the bargaining table is a different story.
Union doesn't believe us or doesn't trust us that we're not trying to break the union. And from our point of view is we don't believe them or don't trust them when they say that they're not wedded to the 1988 BCOA agreement.
In Russell County, Virginia,
Police say the striking miners were blocking the entrance into the mine site. Police still report a number of broken windshields and glass to vehicles. In addition, numerous jack rocks were discovered on the roadway. Pittston Coal Group President Michael Odom says both sides at the bargaining table have been discussing ways to stop the erosion of mining jobs. Odom says the talks are aimed at finding a way for Pittston to remain competitive in the world market without costing the union jobs.
Damage during rock-throwing incidents at both the Moss No. 3 and McClure mines. The rock-throwing allegedly occurred around midnight and 7 this morning. Meanwhile, no significant developments have come forth in federal mediation efforts to end the month-old strike. The two sides, however, will return to the bargaining table next week in an effort to end the walkout.
To use less force. A Virginia State Police spokesman says he was surprised and disappointed to learn about Terry's reaction. Spokesman Charles Vaughn says troopers have had the full support of the Attorney General's office and the governor in the coal fields. Dozens of striking miners have complained of injuries, some requiring hospital treatment. A lawyer representing arrested miners says the injuries may result in lawsuits.
Over picket line incidents. The union is facing the possibility of contempt of court charges in Russell County. News Center 5's Lisa Mitchell has more.
Of the numerous police reports, one incident branding the day as rough left a truck and a coal convoy out of Pittston's preparation plant with a shattered windshield and the driver bleeding. Pittston workers pointed to a large gathering of strikers.
It seems like they'll stop at nothing. They're running in gangs, they're throwing rocks, they're using slingshots, slinging steel balls and objects of lead.
But police made no arrests in this incident and say they have no suspects. Later, they arrested 2 strikers for more rock throwing. Union leaders continue to insist they are labeled unfairly as violent.
They brand us all the time. That's their tactic. What we've been doing, civil resistance. We had one busload arrested today. We're keeping the strike peaceful. And they're wanting to turn it bad, make the people think that we're violent, trying to turn the community support against us. But I think the community knows what it's all about and who the good guys are and who the bad guys are.
In addition to Tuesday's contempt of court hearing, Pittston also has filed new unfair labor practice charges with the National Labor Relations Board over strike incidents.
What I'd like to see is for our striking employees and any persons acting as agents or representative of the union legally expressing their rights to strike and inform the public of the strike and its position with regard to the strike and the contract negotiations, and allowing us our legal rights granted to us while they strike.
The Labor Board has set a June 5th hearing on the charges in Big Stone Gap. In Russell County, Virginia, Lisa Mitchell, News Center 5.
Mike Odom says the complaint is a result. She joins us now by phone. Lisa, any decision yet?
Yes, John. Russell County Circuit Court Judge Don McLaughlin has ordered strike organizer Marty Hudson to jail for 13 days and has imposed hefty fines against the union for contempt of court. Judge McLaughlin's ruling came after passionate arguments before a crowd of striking miners and supporters who spilled into the halls and outside. Pittston lawyers had urged McLaughlin to put a stop to the mass gatherings on picket lines, sit-ins that block mine access roads, and strike violence. They also said McLaughlin should send a message that violations of the law and court orders won't be tolerated. Union lawyers pointed to a lack of proof of which miners were involved in violence. They didn't deny that their mass gatherings alone violate a court injunction, but comparing the union's tactics to illegal efforts to free slaves in Civil War times, they said this is a case of fighting a greater wrong, and that's Pittston. But Judge McLaughlin said this is not a matter of human rights like that was. It's an economic labor dispute. In Lebanon, Virginia, Lisa Mitchell, News Center.
Union for contempt of court violations during the union's 7-week-long strike going on in Virginia against the Pittston Coal Group. Russell County, Virginia Circuit Court Judge Don McLaughlin Jr. ruled late last night after some 12 hours of testimony by both the Pittston Coal Group and the union. News Center 5's Lisa Mitchell with the story.
Striking miners and supporters left the courtroom somberly after the ruling from Judge McLaughlin. who said he'll reduce the fine to $216,000 if the union starts complying with his court orders to limit the size and location of picket lines and stop rock and nail throwing.
I think the court voiced that he was very impressed with the sincerity of a lot of our witnesses, tried to understand where we were coming from. We had hoped for a slightly better result, but at the same time, when you consider the company was asking for $2 million a day in fines, you've got to be somewhat relieved with the results.
I think obviously the judge was impressed with the evidence, and I think it evidences his concern that the laws of the Commonwealth be applied evenly to all parties in this labor dispute. And we're very hopeful that the court's judgment will result in an end to the violence.
Union lawyers characterized mass demonstrations on the picket lines as wrong, but fighting greater wrongs by Pittston. From now on, Judge McLaughlin said he'll fine the union $100,000 for any act of violence by strikers, and he'll levy a $20,000 fine each day for mass picket gatherings.
Well, you have to do what the judge says.
Do I think it hurts the strike? Absolutely not. I think in tough times, people will grow closer.
McLaughlin also ordered $13,000 fines for both Stump and Hudson, but said if they comply with court orders, he'll suspend the fines to $1,000. In Lebanon, Virginia, Lisa Mitchell.
The Pittston Company shareholders meeting in Greenwich, Connecticut. The United Mine Workers, with a union local, recently formed an independent shareholders committee to make a proxy fight against company management. That may sound like a sophisticated weapon for a union management dispute, but behind it is an old-fashioned labor war. Bob Fall reports.
In the coal fields of southern Virginia, it looks like, it sounds like, and it sometimes is a kind of war. Outfitted in camouflage fatigues to show their solidarity, 1,500 striking United Mine Workers are copying the tactics of the 1960s. Their so-called civil resistance has triggered more than 1,000 arrests since the strike began April 5th.
You think they can stand it? And you tell us that this tactic's not working? This is nonviolent, and it's working.
Anything we can do to disrupt the flow of coal and do it through the civil resistance, that's what we're going to do.
The strike, though, is more than a peaceful protest. Tires have been slashed, windows smashed, a company house burned.
Well, there's all kinds of rocks being thrown at us, and they put nails in the road. They got jack rocks. Just anything they can come up with to try to stop us.
This is not Gandhi fashion. It's not Martin Luther King Jr. fashion. This is old-fashioned violence that's in keeping with the trend of the United Mine Workers of America.
This is also an old-fashioned dispute between a company which says it must streamline to survive, be flexible to compete, and miners who say the company is using competition as a club to bust the union.
They are striking not over wages, but primarily over proposed changes in work rules the UMWA says would bring non-union employees into the mines. The company, to compete in foreign markets, says it needs more leeway in scheduling when the mines and miners operate.
They're trying to make them work on Sunday, and that is their God-given right to not have to work on Sunday.
Already the strike has crippled local businesses, which nonetheless have rallied to the miners' cause.
These people are the people we live with. These people are the people that we make our living from, you know. We would love to be neutral, but how can you?
Still, the strike is tearing small communities apart. Some merchants, the company insists, have been threatened. Some families are divided.
One of the local state troopers, who I work with on a regular day-to-day basis, last week he arrested his own brother twice.
The two sides agree only that they will talk with a federal mediator and that this is a test case which will show how much an industry and workforce... The two sides agree only that they will talk with a federal mediator and that this is a test case which will show how much an industry and workforce, which have changed radically in recent years, will have to change again. Bob Fall, CBS News, Carbo, Virginia.
United Mine Workers officials had filed motions asking that Jones be disqualified. But Jones says he made the request to the Attorney General Mary Sue Terry before the controversy erupted. Jones says he had some question about serving as prosecutor all along. He and his wife own an interest in the Skeens Fork mine that contracts all of its coal to Clinchfield, a Pittston subsidiary. Jones says he's relieved, but now a new prosecutor will have to be found. That will be up to Judge Don McLaughlin though Virginia's governor can send in a group of special prosecutors or hire private attorneys to dispose of the cases. The Russell County Prosecutor's Office will assist in the cases by offering office space and administrative assistance to whomever is named. Jim Conrad, News Center 5.
The county circuit judge ruled against the union in contempt charges brought by the Pittston Coal Group. Judge Don McLaughlin, Jr. fined the union more than $600,000 for contempt of court. The judge did say, however, that he would reduce the fines if the union complies with his court order limiting the number of locations and strikers on picket lines and stop the rock and nail throwing.
The court voiced that he was very impressed with the sincerity of a lot of their witnesses. Tried to understand where we were coming from. We had hoped for a slightly better result, but at the same time, when you consider the company was asking for $2 million a day in fines, you've got to be somewhat relieved with the results. I think obviously the judge was impressed with the evidence, and I think it evidences his concern that the laws of the Commonwealth be applied evenly to all parties in this labor dispute, and we're very hopeful that the court's judgment will result in an end to the violence.
Judge McLaughlin said he will fine the union $100,000 for any act of violence and $20,000 each day for mass picket gathering. Destroyed telephone equipment in Russell County, Virginia. Federal alcohol, tobacco, and firearms agents say 2 bombs were planted at the base of a pole holding C&P telephone switching equipment. 1 bomb exploded, doing about $50,000 in damage. The other is in possession of the Virginia State Police. Both state and federal authorities are investigating the matter. Federal charges could result. 200 telephone customers lost service, including Pittston's Moss No. 3 coal plant. About 300 striking miners gathered today in Russell County to hear about yesterday's court decision imposing fines and limiting pickets. News Center 5's John Mongol has more.
Pittston coal operations in Russell and Dickinson counties. Most of the striking miners seem to be waiting for word from their organizers.
Well, I really can't comment on, what happened last night. We'll just have to get with our people and talk it over with them and, to see what the outcome will be.
Around noon, striking United Mine Workers started to gather near the Moss No. 3 preparation plant to meet with union leaders.
Following the circuit court ruling, the picket lines are quieter and more peaceful than they've been in several days. Union organizers say that they're trying to keep the peace and that they'll take a wait-and-see attitude on their next strategy in the strike.
But from the company's point of view, that tranquility was only on the surface.
Been a lot of jack rocks, some broken windows again, windshields, some rockings this morning.
Where?
In the Moss 3 area in the road service.
Union officials will not comment on their future strategy in the 6-week-old strike, but they say their ranks are committed.
Well, the spirits are high. Everybody knew there would be, something come down. But all in all, everybody's spirits are high, and the struggle goes on.
Meanwhile, negotiations are continuing, but so far, little progress has been reported.
So last week was spent bringing everybody up to date and trying to make certain everyone agreed on the issues that you were at gridlock over.
In Russell County, Virginia, John Mongol, News Center.
An injunction limiting the number of picketers at Pittston Coal Operation. Strike coordinator Marty Hudson and District 28 President Jackie Stump were also fined, but Stump was back on the picket line today. Pittston officials announced today a National Labor Relations Board complaint against the union will be heard May 24th. The company will seek a federal injunction before Judge Glenn Williams.
A judge's strike rules. Sit-down demonstrations were peaceful and no one resisted arrest. The picketing could cost the union several $100,000 in fines. On another matter, Virginia Attorney General Mary Sue Terry has denied criticizing state police for using force in arresting striking coal miners. Terry says at no time did she say she was enraged or angry with what was going on. She added she saw nothing wrong or illegal in the way state police were making arrests.
State police arrested more than 150 miners today at Pittston Coal Group's main processing plant near Carbo, Virginia. The arrests were made despite an injunction set down yesterday limiting the number of picketers, but the union contends its peaceful civil disobedience will continue.
We want to do it in a nonviolent way And the way that we feel like we can do it and do it in a nonviolent way is due to civil resistance.
A United Mine Worker District President's meeting was held earlier today at the Moss plant, where an Indiana Mine Workers Union donated more than $71,000 to help the Southwest Virginia miners' efforts.
Overseas Soviet miners were blocking the entrance to Pittston's main processing plant near Carbo, where more than 600 strikers and their supporters had gathered. Day has done
picketing, but organizers of the mine workers' strike say they'll continue picketing the company. News Center 5's John Mongo reports from Russell County.
The picket lines were quiet today, but the striking United Mine Workers were out in force. One strike leader said the pickets were just resting, but the union, the company, and the state police expect that situation will change.
I don't see no storms in the horizon other than, a lot of civil disobedience and a lot of people, standing up for what they believe in.
Though no date has been set yet, Pittston officials said that they have requested another contempt of court hearing because the pickets continue to violate limitations of a 1-month-old injunction.
Despite the court ruling in Lebanon earlier this week, the number of pickets here at the Moss No. 3 plant has actually increased. And union organizers say that they expect to continue their civil disobedience despite the heavy fines being levied by the court.
$20,000 is a lot of money. I think what you have to weigh it against is 1,700 jobs. Obviously, we're not even admitting, or could we interpret that we're violating it. That's only up to the judge.
We will continue to use them and use the due process of the laws and the courts.
Union members said they did not want to bother state police with mass arrests today because the police were weighing Pittston trucks traveling Russell County coal haul roads.
This is a pretty common occurrence frequently throughout the year that the scales are brought out and weigh our trucks, weigh all trucks that are on the highway.
The federally mediated negotiations between the company and the union are temporarily stalled. The negotiators will take 7 days off and return to the bargaining table after Memorial Day. In Russell County, Virginia, John Mongol, News Center 5.
Will continue. UMW spokesman Joe Corcoran declined to reveal any future strike tactics, but did say the union is not tied to any particular strategy. Over 100 striking miners were arrested today in front of the Carbo mines. Nearly 600 showed up in protest. State police said the miners put up no resistance when asked to leave or when they were arrested.
16
mines in Dickinson County. An exhaust fan at the Lambert Fork mine was blown up at 1 o'clock this morning. This afternoon, more than 100 people were arrested as they sat in front of Pittston trucks. As Tom Callan reports, the civil disobedience continues despite a court injunction against blocking mine entrances.
Get up and get on a bus or you'll be charged with resisting arrest.
The people on the picket line say they don't care what the court orders. They will continue to lay down in front of arriving trucks. And it's not only miners who are willing to get arrested. For the miners out here on the picket lines, the drivers of these trucks are called scabs. But for Pittston, they are necessary replacement workers. The men on the picket line get paid $200 a week. Drivers brought in to keep the coal moving during the strike receive at least $175 a day. Behind the wheel of this truck is a 25-year-old hauler from Bluefield, West Virginia.
I don't feel I'm taking nobody's job. I just feel like, that we're just coming here doing the work for Pittston Coal Company because they won't do it.
The substitute drivers call the stretch of highway between the Laurel Mountain Mine and the Moss Processing Plant the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They told us they are often ambushed by a barrage of rocks and bottles. But one driver admits he doesn't mind the risk. I guess for you, it's good news if the strike continues?
In a way, you might say that, yeah.
Back on the picket line, the men say they don't care if the strike continues indefinitely. They say their $100 million strike fund will continue forever. In the meantime, they want Pittston to burn. On the News Watch in Clinchfield, Virginia, Tom Callan, WKPT News.
The names of the truck drivers in the
plant in South Clinchfield. Frank Jones was there today, and he's here with more. Frank?
Bob, Virginia State Police arrested more than 100 strikers in their latest roundup today. However, most of those arrests came this morning. By this afternoon, strikers decided to use a different tactic.
It's not the usual sight you'd see just outside the Moss No. 3 processing plant. Instead of striking miners lining the streets carrying their pickets, they decided to take to the road, possibly just another attempt to slow down production at the plant.
Try
try to get them off guard for a little bit, try to keep them away from here.
Just out cooling it off, riding around.
Meanwhile, as these strikers filled the streets, others returned by bus from the Blackburn Correctional Facility. That's where they'd spent nearly 5 hours after being arrested earlier in the morning for blocking the plant's entrance.
I just felt like I should have helped my husband and help all the miners, you know, strikers.
I've got a family here, and it's important to get arrested because if you don't show support, then they're gonna keep hauling coal.
Just last week, Russell County Circuit Court Judge Donald McLaughlin imposed a $216,000 fine against the union. McLaughlin said the striking miners were guilty of 72 separate violations. But District 28 President Jackie Stump says the fines aren't enough to deter strikers.
The reason we're doing it is that this is a way that people vent frustrations that they got against the company. We do it this way, and there's not been an incident that I'm aware of, anything today that's happened. Hasn't been any problems since probably the court day that can be attributed to the mine workers.
Stump says this is not necessarily the end to the arrests. He says if necessary, they'll continue their demonstrations, doing whatever it takes to get their message to Pittston. Bob?
Well, Frank, the mediation efforts, what about those? What's the progress?
Well, those have stopped now. They continued through last week up in New York, but the federal mediator, that has stopped for now, and they'll resume those once again after Memorial Day. But right now, those two appear to be at a stalemate.
Okay, Frank Jones, thank you. A little calmer just down the road at the Lambert Fork Mine in Dickinson County, that after an explosion there last night. A Virginia State Police spokesman says an exhaust fan blew up around 1 a.m. Although investigators are still unsure what was used to explode the fan, they are calling it a deliberate explosion, but they admit they have no direct evidence linking it to the strike. Meanwhile, UMW District 28 President Jackie Stump maintains the union had nothing to do with the explosion.
We've been accused of everything except the flash floods. So, it ain't gonna make any difference what happens. The company has Vance Security in here, and Vance Security is set up to do all this type of work, to cause confusions. They'll go out and do it, then try to blame it on us, because the longer that they can stay and keep things going, the more money they make.
Just last week, officials say a telephone switch box outside Pittston's main coal processing.
Of a Pittston mine in southwest Virginia. The Pittston Coal Group says it was sabotage, but so far, investigators have no evidence to link the blast to the ongoing strike. News Center 5's Lisa Mitchell reports from Dickinson County.
Officials say explosives, possibly dynamite, blew up the ventilation fan at the Lambert Fork mine, shutting down the operation.
Blew a big hole in the ground and blew a big hole in the fan. A lot of shrapnel and flying debris.
At this point, no one is blaming the striking miners who continue to stage mass picket line demonstrations despite court injunctions prohibiting them. Pittston is preparing to go back to court to push for imposing heavy fines against the union. Union leaders continue to say large peaceful demonstrations on the picket line must continue to prevent violence.
When we're here and we can watch our people, I'm not concerned because they are not going to do anything violent. If you've got 1,700 people out on their own, then I can't control them and nobody else can control them. And that's the reason we're doing this.
Picket gatherings seem as big or bigger than ever before. Some activities are new, like burning parts of a Pittston work uniform.
This time, the union managed to block the entrance to the preparation plant by using small groups. Small groups sat down and blocked the coal hauling trucks for some time. All told, about 100 were arrested.
New faces have joined the picket line, like Robert Grant, a Pittston retiree who was forced to undergo open heart surgery after Pittston cut off health benefits because of the strike.
Look across the blue shield I've had all, and I'm having to pick it up and pay the rest of it myself, about $10,000 for the operation.
In Russell County, Virginia, Lisa Mitchell.
Reclamation project. Reporter Tom Callan traveled to Grundy.
Pittston Coal Group. About 40 cases went before a special strike judge today in Lebanon, Virginia. And as News Center 5's Lisa Mitchell reports, the result was only one misdemeanor conviction.
Lack of evidence led to dismissal of charges against one miner arrested for taking part in a riot-like rock-throwing incident. That caused a special strike prosecutor from Tazewell County to back off and not prosecute 24 other similar cases.
These cases, the problem was with identifying specific people as having committed an overt act.
Special Judge Coy Kaiser, brought in from Waynesboro because of the huge strike caseload here, imposed a $50 fine and a 30-day suspended jail sentence on one other striker for throwing a twisted nail in front of a coal convoy. Counter charges of police brutality were dismissed, and a few cases on the docket were continued. Despite the single misdemeanor conviction, the attorney representing union members isn't declaring victory.
And it's a situation where, sure, they're happy that the cases were dismissed, but it doesn't take away from the fact that these men were hauled into court without any probable cause. They have been accused of felonies. They've had to go get bonds from their neighbors in order to get out of jail. Many of them have had 5- and 6-hour bus drives to be processed, and it's basically a situation where they view it as a dismissal of a case that never should have been brought.
The cases went to court as mass gatherings, sit-ins, and arrests continued on the picket line, and as the Pittston Coal Group maintained that the violence is real and focused its newspaper advertising campaign on the UMW's violent history.
It's not random, it's not chance events that are occurring. This document, after studying the United Mine Workers for 40 years, demonstrates it's all very well orchestrated, organized, and controlled.
In Russell County, Virginia, Lisa Mitchell.
Various clergy and religious leaders from Southwest Virginia and East Tennessee will come out, throw their support behind striking miners. Meanwhile, today, about 30 more arrests were made at the Moss No. 3 plant near St. Paul. Several of the miners' children also joined the picket line today. They were singing songs and shouting cheers, saying the strike could have an impact on their education. One student said, quote, "If my dad's not working, I can't go to college."
Lack of evidence led to dismissal of charges against one miner.
Strict strike activities. Virginia State Police say more than 100 people were arrested in peaceful sit-down demonstrations. Many of those arrested this afternoon were not miners, but church leaders. The clergymen carried off to jail said they wanted to show their solidarity with the United Mine Workers. Both Episcopal and Catholic religious leaders participated in today's symbolic protest against Pittston Coal Company.
And I know we're about a month away from summer, but
And efforts to stop the strikers' mass gatherings and blocking of mine entrances expanded to federal court. News Center 5's Lisa Mitchell reports.
Day 50 on the picket lines brought another large crowd, and the focus was on the expiration of the old union contract, canceling health benefits for Pittston retirees, disabled workers, and widows, with a wheelchair-bound disabled miner becoming arrest number 2,000, followed by the arrest of a group of church activists who joined mine entrance sit-ins.
I have to do it because it's right. It's like the prophets. Isaiah and Jeremiah didn't know that things would change. They knew they had to speak out.
You got God on your side. Strike leaders called the cause, not the 2,000 arrest number, significant.
It's not significant in that it's a large number. It's significant, I guess, in that many people in this area believe in what they're doing.
With the picket line arrests underway, Pittston and the National Labor Relations Board obtained a temporary restraining order in federal court ordering the mass gatherings and blocking of Pittston facilities to stop. Union attorneys argued that an existing state court injunction makes federal court intervention unnecessary, that the National Labor Relations Board joining Pittston in this action says the union's violation of state court orders makes federal court action necessary. Federal Judge Glenn Williams will consider issuing an injunction against the union at a hearing in 10 days. In Southwest Virginia, Lisa Mitchell, News Center 5.
The labor market in the Tri-City.
U.S. District Judge Glenn Williams issued a temporary restraining order that calls on the union to stop picketing in masses, blocking the paths of coal trucks and damaging company property. The UMW is expected to ignore the order sought by the National Labor Relations Board, as it has ignored a similar injunction issued by a Russell County Circuit Court judge. Meanwhile, there were more arrests in the coal fields today. More than 120 people were arrested, but this time there were some new faces on the picket line. Frank Jones reports.
This isn't an unusual sight in the Virginia coal fields these days, but this is. Gail Gentry was paralyzed from the waist down 11 years ago when a roof caved in at a Pittston mine. And like the other 120 miners who blocked the entrance to the Moss No. 3 plant, he too was carted off to jail. But striking miners weren't the only ones arrested. So were several clergymen. More than a dozen church leaders from 4 different states decided they too would join the picket lines in Russell County.
I believe that these folks are suffering, and maybe suffering the loss of a whole lot, and we need to be next to them.
It's much bigger than just this local area. I think the whole labor movement is really at stake, and it's very important for this to happen.
Help us to eliminate cruelty to these our neighbors. Strengthen those who spend their lives establishing equal protection of the law and equal opportunities for all.
With that, Virginia State Police informed the church leaders they were violating the law by blocking the plant's entrance, and just like the strikers, they too were hauled off to jail.
I've got to, because it's right, and what's happening is wrong. The law is wrong. And God love these troopers. They're the troopers of my Virginia. It says Sic Semper Tyrannis on there, and they're enforcing tyranny. And it's got to be changed. It's wrong.
These strikers say they're happy to see these clergymen come out to support their cause. They say all of this support is just proof that their cause really is worth fighting for.
Police to make their civil disobedience orderly. News Center 5's John Mongo reports from Russell County, Virginia.
With the strike against Pittston Coal entering its 8th week, arrests are becoming more orchestrated.
Failure to move will result in your arrest. Do you understand what I've told you? I'm asking you to move now.
Most of the pickets portray themselves as peace-loving people who have never been in trouble with the law.
I've never been arrested before until this, but this is worthwhile.
Truck drivers blocked the road in front of the Moss 3 prep plant, waiting for the repeated demonstrations and arrests between every other truck.
Well, I ain't crazy about it, but I got to make money, you know. I got a living to make, you know. Got to work.
I just wish they'd go back to West Virginia and leave us to get a contract.
Music played.
We're fighting for our union. I shall not be moved. Fighting for our union. I shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's planted by the water. I shall not be moved.
And women beat pans. And spirits remained high as some 55 union members were loaded into buses. Despite 2 court orders limiting pickets and fines that could start at $20,000 a day, morale remains high here at the picket line at Moss number 3. And a strike that both sides say has the potential to be one of the longest in the history of the industry.
We've tried to do the civil resistance and do it in a nonviolent way. I guess it just helps to prove that some of the violence may not have been attributed to us.
But the relative civility of the union's activities is a matter of perspective.
Whether it's violent or nonviolent depends on which end of the rock you're on. You know, if it's going away from you, it's a pretty harmless weapon. But if it's coming at you, it tends to become more menacing as it gets closer.
There appears to be no end in sight, with federal mediation remaining at a standstill until after the long Memorial Day weekend and numerous state and federal court dates set throughout next month. In Russell County, Virginia, John Mongo, News Center 5.
Thing of the past. On April 5th, about 1,400 miners went on strike against the Pittston Coal Group, charging it with unfair labor practices. Since that time, strikers have used a number of tactics, including blocking the entrances to Pittston's plants, often being arrested. Watson says many unions are finding such tactics aren't always successful.
Strikes really are not the ultimate weapon that they used to be. They're not that effective, and where employees are permanently replaced, which is, of course, legal for the employers to do, they have ended up with some very disastrous situations.
The UMW strike is nearly 2 months old. Watson says that could be a sign that the strike might not be working.
Good evening. More arrests in the coal fields on a promise from union organizers to expand their strike at the Pittston Company. But our top story tonight, the weather. Dave Jerks joins us. Organizers promise to expand the strike to other companies. News Center 5's John Mongo reports some 200 arrests today.
The scene at Pittston's Moss number 3 plant today was much the same as it has been all week. but with an added threat.
I mean, there will be other operators, though, let me say, that's clearly filling Pittston's orders that we'll have to deal with as time goes on.
Union organizers say that they expect to escalate the strike to other companies as early as next week. Union spokesmen say they will use Memorial Days and contracts with other companies to address grievances with those companies and to expand picket lines throughout the coal fields.
And they're calling the employees off the job. If that's what the union calls unprecedented levels of stability and cooperation, I don't want any part of it.
As the routine of road blockages, sit-downs, and arrests continued, striking union members were bolstered by union organizers.
What they're going to get is bodies after bodies after bodies.
And joined by labor activists from outside the coal industry.
People have fought for a long time to get these health benefits and all the rights they need, and they have a right to them. And I don't see these big companies coming in and messing over people.
You feel like they're trying to break this union?
Oh, obviously.
I would very disappointed that before they take a position on either side of an issue that they haven't attempted to contact the company and discuss, find out the facts from our point of view.
Both the company and the union say they will observe the Memorial Day holiday on Monday before resuming activities on the picket lines and in the courts next week. In Russell County, Virginia, John Mongol, News Center 5.
There are several developments today in the United Mine Workers Union strike against the Pittston Coal Group. In Tazewell County, Virginia, a circuit judge fined the union $300,000 for breaking his rules on picketing at companies being struck in connection with the labor dispute. Judge N.E. Person ruled the union was in contempt of an order he issued last month. Along with the fine, he banned nighttime picketing and reduced the number of UMW pickets allowed at Covenant Coal Company, Muddy Creek Energy, and JK&G Coal Corporation. These companies supply coal to Pittston. Also, Pittston President Mike Odom says fake copies of a contract are being circulated in the coal fields. Odom says the document does not state that it is a Pittston contract. It contains false information and is being distributed by persons saying it is Pittston's.
I want to know, who is it? Whose contract is this? It's not Pittston's. I want to know who's distributing it. I'd like somebody in the union to stand up and be a man or woman and say who this contract belongs to.
Pittston planned to mail out copies of the real contract today. The contract was implemented after negotiations between the company and the UMW broke off. UMW President Rich Trumka is questioning Virginia State Police surveillance with camera crews of a legal demonstration in Richmond today. About 800 miners from half a dozen states pledged support for the striking Pittston miners. Trumka called the state police action troubling and termed it police state surveillance tactics. The Richmond rally is timed to commemorate the 6th anniversary of an explosion that killed 7 miners at the McClure No. 1 mine in Dickinson County, Virginia in 1983. News Center 5's Lisa Mitchell reports on the service held near the mine site today.
We ask you today on this anniversary of a terrible disaster to remember the families of the 7 miners who would be with us today if it had not been for the explosion, dear God.
Every year since the methane explosion that killed 7 here, McClure miners have honored those who died and their survivors.
It's just something that we'll never forget that happened at this mine. If everybody forgets what can happen, then it'll happen again.
For several years after the disaster, McClure miners just refused to work on the anniversary. Threatened with company action, 2 years ago, the International Union declared the anniversary an official Memorial Day. Strikers from other Pittston operations joined the memorial service, along with teachers from the coal fields and the president of the Virginia Education Association, who are supporting the union struggle for salary, health, and pension benefits in the strike.
What happens to the miners here affects not only the economy, which therefore affects our schools, our children, and our teachers.
Pittston did not shut down the McClure mine with the strike underway this year. It did call for a moment of silence at the mine and conducted special safety sessions. In McClure, Virginia, Lisa Mitchell, News Center 5.
Miners from West Virginia, Kentucky, Indiana, and Alabama join local miners at a rally tonight in St. Paul. Strike officials are calling the strike the People's Movement.
No longer should coal miners, working class people, simply because you live in southwestern Virginia, have second-rate school systems, second-rate roads, and have less of an opportunity than someone living in northern Virginia where I live. Stand up, be counted. Now's the time.
According to Delegate Jack Kennedy, the future of Southwest Virginia hinges on the outcome of the strike.
Some updates for you. The UMWA must survive. It's important to the future of economic development in Southwest Virginia.
Several unions across the country are raising money for the striking miners in Southwest Virginia. President moving to cross picket lines at the company's operations in Wise and Lee counties. News Center 5's Lisa Mitchell reports.
All 11 Westmoreland mines shut down again just after the announcement of 87 layoffs blamed on earlier work stoppages and disciplinary action against 3 employees for participating in the Pittston strike. Westmoreland workers are refusing to cross what the union calls stranger picket lines.
The stranger pickets, I believe or assume, are from Pittston, and they don't appreciate how Westmoreland has supported Pittston, and they don't appreciate how Westmoreland has treated their employees.
The pickets have been appearing at shift change and then leave.
The Westmoreland people, as I understood it, returned to work last week, and we expect them to be working this week, and it came as a total surprise when I found out that they had some stranger pickets and were out again last night.
The work stoppage has brought Westmoreland to federal court here in Big Stone Gap. The company has obtained a temporary restraining order directing the union to send its members back to work. The court order, good for 10 days, will be dissolved or expanded depending on the union's reaction.
Westmoreland workers don't have any control over that. It's just a fact. A union employee will not cross a picket line, and I guess they have to live with the consequences.
In Wise County, Virginia, Lisa Mitchell, News Center 5.
Strike coordinators jailed for contempt of court have cleared themselves. As News Center 5's Lisa Mitchell reports, they did it by appearing before a federal judge requesting a private meeting instead of an open court hearing.
All they had to do was say they would obey the order and not be having other people to disobey the order, and they wouldn't have gone to jail in the first place.
And that's all strike leaders Marty Hudson, Jackie Stump, and C.A. Phillips did to gain freedom from jail after a 2-week stay that's left them with mixed feelings.
It's not good to be locked up. It's not good to be in an institution. But it's worse to be locked up when you don't feel like you've done anything. I mean, it's harder to understand, and it's harder to take.
I feel stronger than I've ever been, and, I'm going to pass that on to all the people.
Supporters gave the trio and section its homecoming outside the courthouse. Inside, Judge Williams had been flooded with mail, urging him to release the strike leaders. The letters came from the Mine Workers Union, other unions, and even one came from Marty Hudson's mother-in-law. The judge says the public outcry wasn't unexpected.
Oh, this is a very highly emotional matter, and it's not unusual on something this emotional and with the feelings that people have to receive mail.
Did it have any bearing on your decision?
No, of course, I don't ignore it. I read my mail and so forth, but I have to arrive at decisions based on what I think is right and wrong rather than public pressure.
This doesn't end federal court contempt cases. Another group of 75 union members are scheduled to appear in court Wednesday, and new complaints of contemptuous conduct in the strike are being reported. In Abingdon, Virginia, Lisa Mitchell, News Center 5.
The federal judge has issued a back-to-work order against the UMW to try to stop a wildcat walkout that's now spread to 9 states. Several hundred of the 27,000 miners involved in the wildcat strike are showing up in southwest Virginia. They're staying at a Solidarity camp in Russell County, 10 acres of property owned by a Pittston miner.
We've got people in here from Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and they're having a ball.
The out-of-state miners also include some who have been laid off at other companies. Union officials say the wildcat walkouts outside the area is part of the union's economic warfare against the Pittston Coal Group. Officials say shutting down other companies with sympathy walkouts is working to put economic pressure on Pittston.
We have information that would lead us to believe that the Japanese are upset with them. The other coal companies in the industry are upset with them.
It's absolutely not true. I've not had one phone call from another coal company putting pressure on us with regard to the strike.
Odom says local and out-of-state miners are using rolling roadblocks on coal roads, and that is slowing production.
Should coal miners, working class people, simply because you live in southwestern Virginia, have second-rate school systems, second-rate roads, and have less of an opportunity than someone living in northern Virginia where I live. Stand up, be counted. Now's the time.
According to Virginia House of Delegates member Jack Kennedy, the future of southwest Virginia hinges on the outcome of this strike.
The UMWA must survive. It's important to the future of economic development in southwest Virginia.
Several unions across the country are raising money for the strikers in southwest Virginia. Group Mike Odom says fake copies of a contract are being circulated in the coal fields. Odom says the document does not state that it is a Pittston contract. It contains false information, he says, and is being distributed by persons saying it came from Pittston.
I want to know, who is it? Whose contract is this? It's not Pittston's. I want to know who's distributing it. I'd like somebody in the union to stand up and be a man or woman and say who this contract belongs to.
Pittston had planned to mail out copies of the real contract yesterday. The contract was implemented after negotiations between the company and the union broke off. The past was also in the minds of miners yesterday as they gathered in Dickinson County, Virginia to commemorate the 6th anniversary of the explosion that killed 7 at the McClure No. 1 mine in 1983. News Center 5's Lisa Mitchell reports.
We ask you today on this anniversary of a terrible disaster to remember the families of the 7 miners who would be with us today if it had not been for the explosion, dear God.
Every year since the methane explosion that killed 7 here, McClure miners have honored those who died and their survivors.
It's just something that we'll never forget that happened at this mine. If everybody forgets what can happen, then it'll happen again.
For several years after the disaster, McClure miners just refused to work on the anniversary. Threatened with company action, 2 years ago, the International Union declared the anniversary an official Memorial Day. Strikers from other Pittston operations joined the memorial service, along with teachers from the coal fields and the president of the Virginia Education Association, who are supporting the union struggle for salary, health, and pension benefits in the strike.
What happens to the miners here affects not only the economy, which therefore affects our schools, our children, and our teachers.
Pittston did not shut down the McClure mine with the strike underway this year. It did call for a moment of silence at the mine and conducted special safety sessions. In McClure, Virginia, Lisa Mitchell, News Center 5.
Workers from 10 states are off the job and lending their support to local pickets. Some 42,000 UMW members are off the job nationwide. News Center 5's John Mongo reports from Southwest Virginia.
Earlier this week, coal truck traffic to preparation plants came to a virtual standstill. Pickets riding cars and pickup trucks are still running afoul of Virginia State Police, though. Numerous traffic tickets are being written for impeding traffic.
They're stopping our people and letting them come across the road. It was up quite a bit yesterday over the day before. And they don't have too many today, but today's not over yet, though.
Pickets were ordered to stop massive gatherings at mine entrances and to stop blocking roads by court orders in state and federal courts. Pickets here at the Moss No. 3 coal preparation plant have moved off the side of the road into vehicles on the road to try to slow coal truck traffic into the plant.
This activity is clearly in violation of court order. It's in violation of the National Labor Relations Act.
That issue may be raised tomorrow in federal court when strike leaders Cecil Roberts and John Cox answer contempt citations before Judge Glenn Williams. Judges across the country are ordering union members back to work, but so far the pickets say there is no change in strategy.
There are a few of them leaving out, I think, going home for the weekend. Some of them leaving today, some leaving tomorrow, but I think they'll be back next week, though.
It has impeded the delivery of our coal.
In Russell County, Virginia, John Mongol, News Center 5.
Of a sympathy strike in West Virginia, a picket was shot and slightly injured at a strike-closed mine there. Under an injunction in Russell County Circuit Court, union attorneys moved a suit filed by Pittston to federal court earlier this month. But a federal judge today ordered it returned to state court. The union had argued that both federal courts and state courts had leveled injunctions against union pickets, and the federal court had priority. But in a ruling today, Judge Glenn Williams stated that the suit was based on the Virginia right-to-work law. There is no similar federal law. The suit was moved after a state judge levied nearly $3 million in fines. The company and the United Mine Workers to resume contract talks, this time in Southwest Virginia. The agreement is the first step toward a possible settlement since talks broke off over a month ago. News Center 5's Lisa Mitchell reports.
I was convinced
Federal Judge Glenn Williams has succeeded in getting the presidents of the coal company and the UMW to meet face-to-face for the first time ever and to agree to resume talks aimed at ending the strike.
and I guess we considered a step is better than no step at all.
We're obviously taking, what happened today is we're taking it at the face value. They're going to return with good faith, and they're going to demonstrate the flexibility that we've heard about. There's nothing else that occurred.
The talks may start as soon as Wednesday at the Duffield Ramada Inn. Pittston is insisting each party occupy separate rooms this time, with the federal mediator carrying contract proposals from one to the other.
But it was time for a different approach to trying to take away the acrimonious atmosphere and give a new way to try to resolve this dispute.
Instead of us taking a position out and them taking a position out and saying, here's our position and here's your position, they don't match. What I've suggested is we ask them for their needs. What do you need? Not what do you want, what do you need? And they ask me, what do we need? What do our people in this area need for an agreement?
Judge Williams was drawn into the strike from contempt of court cases stemming from union efforts to stop Pittston's production. He says he felt compelled to push for resumed talks, not because of the court cases, but because the dispute is turning neighbor against neighbor in coal-filled communities.
The biggest thing is the division among people, animosity and divisiveness.
Whether or not this works to end the strike remains to be seen. If it doesn't, Judge Williams, at the union's request, will be making a list of alternative mediators. In Duffield, Virginia, Lisa Mitchell, News Center 5.
Miners and their families. News Center 5's John Mongol takes a look at businesses in Southwest Virginia.
With high unemployment and the uncertainty of the coal industry, there aren't many economic booms here in Dickinson County's seat. But as the strike between the United Mine Workers and Pittston Coal drags on, it becomes harder and harder for small businesses.
They don't know how long it's going to hold out, and it's more careful than they was before.
It's hurting me every day. I mean, I can hold out a little while, but speaking for the other businesses, I can't do that, but now I'm hurting.
It's hard on retailers now, but some of them have felt the economic pressure since the union's last contract expired.
I feel a difference now, but I felt a difference for the last 2 years, not just now. Before they started, you know, the contract, they knew the contract was coming up, and most miners started economizing then.
Some sales have actually increased during the strike, such as the sale of camouflage clothing. But many of the merchants selling the Solidarity colors are donating part of that profit to the union. A storefront here in Clintwood looks the same as it would almost everywhere, except for one large difference. Almost every storefront has a sign of support for the United Mine Workers.
If they don't get this contract, our whole town goes down.
They're fighting for a cause, and I support them.
And apparently the striking miners and their families support their local businesses too. They're spending what money they have in their hometowns. In Clintwood, Virginia, John Mongol, News Center 5.
President Richard Trumka, along with Cecil Roberts and Marty Hudson, blasted the latest efforts to agree on a contract.
When they sat in front of Judge Williams, there were no conditions. Now they put a condition on it. In order for us to bargain, we have to relinquish. We have to turn our back on 130,000 pensions. That's what it says.
Meanwhile, the mayor of Boston, Richard Flynn, says that if a strike settlement has not been reached in 7 days, the city would boycott a large bank connected with Pittston.
The mayor of that city has indicated to Bill Craig, who is the head of the Shawmut Bank, who is also on the board of directors of Pittston, that if something didn't happen in 7 days, that the city of Boston, which channels millions of dollars through that institution, and the mayor will be telling us about that tomorrow, that the city will discontinue their service with that bank.
Miners from several states continue to show support for striking Pittston miners. Charges of reckless driving and brandishing a firearm against Jesse Meadows. Meadows was charged with hitting 3 picketing United Mine Workers Union members with his truck on May 2nd. Rocks broke the windows in Meadows' truck, and the truck driven by his son.
The Commonwealth had to show probable cause. They didn't have to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, and as a result of that, we did not present today all the evidence we have to introduce at the trial.
So you're optimistic he'll...
Very optimistic.
Meadows was knocked out by the rock, which broke the glass in his truck, and his son suffered a broken jaw. Meadows' lawyer says he will ask for a change of venue if Meadows is convicted. The Pittston Coal Group and the United Mine Workers Union were back in the state courts in Lebanon, Virginia yesterday. Circuit Court Judge Don McLaughlin began hearing evidence on compliance with his injunction against the union. 2 months ago, Judge McLaughlin fined the union almost $3 million for blocking company coal trucks. Most of yesterday's testimony came from state police who have been citing striking miners for impeding coal truck traffic. The hearing, that is, continues this morning in Russell County, Virginia Circuit Court. And
workers also say that they will be the winners in the end, and so do their children. Margaret Moore, Eyewitness News 11, St. Paul, Virginia.
Some local officials on
Gun, don't know what type right now, but each truck sustained a shot into the radiator. One had one shot in a windshield, the other one had 2 shots in the...
No injuries were reported. The incident reportedly happened on Route 615 this morning.
News Center 5's Lisa Mitchell has a story from Russell County, Virginia.
Kentucky native Ned Beatty, who got his start at professional theaters in this region, hammed it up on the picket line, joining in union songs and applauding more sit-in arrests. Himself a member of actors' unions, Beatty says a union-breaking wave is underway, and other unions are looking at this strike to stop the trend.
These are tough people out here. You know, you don't mess with these people. And anybody thinks they can mess with them, I'd suggest to them they not do it. Because this is serious, you know. We let the flight controllers go just like that, and if we'd all been there, if we'd had enough sense to say you can't do that, we wouldn't be doing this today. Because that's where they got this idea. We can put these unions off. We can put them out.
Pittston denies it's trying to break this union and has advanced a proposal at federally mediated talks to try to address concerns. Company President Mike Odom says he admires Beatty as an actor, but Beatty doesn't know both sides.
He didn't ask for our point of view. He didn't contact us for any feedback. I don't see how he can be making an informed statement.
While Beatty was on the picket line, nearby 2 coal trucks were damaged, according to Pittston, by sniper gunfire. Beatty, who once played a coal miner in a television movie, preached patience and peace.
As long as this can stay nonviolent, the more people will join you. The more people will join you. And you know yourself, if it turns the other way, you'll lose those outside people.
In Russell County, Virginia, Lisa Mitchell, News Center.
A worker who was recently involved with the filming of a movie with Beatty in Letcher County, Kentucky. A United Auto Workers local in Michigan is making a couple of donations to the United Mine Workers.